Mr. Mayo.
Hey, how are you, sir?
I finally tested negative for COVID, so I'm doing well.
Oh, were you positive before?
Oh yeah, when I talked to you before, I was positive.
Oh, when you talked to me from skiing?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
I didn't
got-
know that. You didn't
I
mention
got
it.
it. I got it at Alta.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
Well, you sound a little hoarse.
yeah. I've sounded this way now for about almost 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah, my first bout with COVID. I hope it's my last.
Yeah,
You sound better.
I'm much better, thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
COVID or just a cold?
It was just a cold. It was very deep in my chest and took me 2 weeks to get over, maybe 17 days.
Wow.
But it didn't help having in the middle of it a week where I had 3-night meetings or 3-night meetings. Was like, oh, I'm too old for this.
Yeah, I hear you.
Let me see, Mr. Gill, Mr. Hogan. Hi, Dennis. Hi, Teray. Hi, Stefan. How are you all?
Good evening. Doing
Good
well.
evening.
Good
And
evening.
Mr. Gill.
Look at me, Steve.
I said Mr. Gill.
Okay.
I wouldn't forget you, Kevin.
And right-hand man.
Well, I don't want to be a spoiler to anybody. Anybody, would I spoil anybody on if I gave you a big NCAA upset?
Oh, geez, there's been 2 of them already. My bracket's
Yeah.
right.
Princeton, big win for Princeton.
Yeah,
Who'd they be?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Wow.
Yeah, huge upset. And Virginia goes down on the last second.
Yeah.
3-point. Absolutely wild. That's what, I mean, the parity in the NCAA now is so evident.
Yeah. It makes it fun.
How we doing, everybody?
Mr. Chairman, I did claim host because you weren't on. I think
Fine and dandy.
you want me to make you the co-host, and usually Dan shares something too, so.
Yeah,
that-
I've got the latest and greatest on the forecast available.
Oh, we don't
Yeah,
want
that's
that.
great. Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll get going in a few minutes.
Sully, your co-host. Dan. Where's Dan?
So, who do we have on?
Cast of thousands.
Mr. Chairman, I did hear from Ellie and Evan. They're gonna be a little late.
Okay, yeah, and I heard from, I think, Jim, who did I hear from? Amy. Amy's gonna be a few minutes late. Parent teacher conference tonight, I think.
Might be. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Those days are over, Sully.
Days are over. Bigger kids, bigger
Yeah.
problems, but they're over.
That's right. More expensive, certainly.
Right. Hello to everybody else that's joining us tonight.
Hey, Mike Boudreau, what are the crutches for behind you?
I had my hip replaced a week ago.
Oh, you old man, you. Come on.
I got the okay to drive, go to work, and use one crutch today. So
Oh, boy, so
recovering-
you got that word today and you're gonna come to the FinCom meeting. What a guy.
I was gonna come, otherwise I'm kind of disappointed at the Zoom. Looking for some
Progress.
symptoms.
I'll tell you what, I'm not disappointed. I'm not disappointed. It's on March 17th like it was last year. That was
Well, we
very
moved it.
problematic.
We
of the
moved
summer.
it for you last year, though.
Oh, that's right. We did move it. Jeekins,
Yes.
crow.
No, you're too old for that crap anyway.
Oh, yeah.
You're under your shawl at home on the couch.
Wow.
It's not easy.
I don't know. You want the options, though.
You do. That's true,
Right.
Steve. You're right. You don't have to, just want to know you could.
I may get out of work
Amy?
early tomorrow. I'll say
Amy?
that.
Amy's here, Sully. So I think on the school committee side, the only one who is supposed to attend, who's not here yet, is Tom Markham.
Yeah, it's just quite 7 o'clock. We got 1, 2, 3, 4,
You have a quorum.
8, right? Is that what I see? Okay. All right, well, good evening tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining. I know, like we said, we have 3 people coming in late. And I'm sure there's others that have joined. Dave just joined. Very good. All right, open it up to any public participation. All right, seeing none. We have 2 meeting minutes to approve. We have the Finance Committee minutes from March 2nd. They weren't on the email, they were on the link that I sent probably last night, I think. So I will entertain.
A motion to approve the finance committee meetings.
Second,
Thank you. Who seconded that?
Teray.
Hooray.
Thank you. All right, any discussion of the meeting minutes? All right, all those in favor accept the meeting minutes, March 2nd, 2023, the full Finance Committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good. Thank you. Next set of meeting minutes is the DPW Subcommittee meeting minutes, March 8th in the afternoon. And I was not there, but there are others that were. Entertain a motion on that.
We can't,
Second,
I'm the only one here.
No,
No.
Stefan is here.
I'm here as well.
Dennis.
Oh, there he is, okay.
Okay, Stefan made the motion, you second,
No.
sorry, Stefan seconded, understood. Hopefully you had a chance to read those meeting minutes. Any comments? All right, entertain a motion to accept the DPW Subcommittee meeting minutes, March 8th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Those were the meeting minutes we had. Tonight, we have the DPW budget. We have a school committee, school department overview / preview. And then we also have the town council budget that was deferred a few meetings ago. So I will turn it over to the DPW. I don't know if Stefan or Dennis want to make any comments before I turn it over to Kevin and then Joe, or vice versa.
I thought we had a very good meeting, very opportunistic to talk to Joe and get an update on where they stand for this year. It's pretty straightforward budget with very few new requests. And hopefully it'll be well received tonight. Thank you.
Stefan, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think the DPW subcommittee had met with Joe and Ann twice over the past month. And we went through the budget line item by line item, spending a particular amount of or increased amount of time on any items that were out of the ordinary. And any questions that we had were Joe and Ann had answers for. But yeah, I think the committee will be happy with the budget that'll be provided or shown this evening.
Very good. Kevin, do you want to go first, or Joe, or any preference?
Can
Sure,
I say one thing before Kevin starts with an overall view, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind? Be 2 sentences. After tonight, the Finance Committee will have received and heard really basically all of the town side budgets, with the exception of health insurance, which I kind of consider a little bit outside of the town side budgets, but you have all the department budgets basically. The grand total to date on them, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, is an increase over fiscal year 23 of 2.67%. I want to congratulate Kevin and the department heads are really working very hard and to keep these budgets in an area that is sustainable. So that being said, I think Joe and Ann did a great job in front of the town council, and Kevin will lead you off on that now. Thank you.
Could I just add, Steve, before Kevin, the summation you usually give us before the meeting, I don't know if I saw it, the totals, the to-date budgets, so if you send that to me, I'll get it to the group.
Jim, I'll get that to you right now. Sorry about that.
No, I think you want the one from Kevin. I think he's talking Kevin's.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's the one from Kevin that comes through you. I apologize. It's the summary to date. So when you have
Yep.
that, you said, thank you. Go ahead, Kev, when you're ready.
Okay, I'll do a quick overview, then turn it over to Joe. The DPW FY 24 operating budget, we're looking to increase that $236,439 over the current fiscal year. This increase breaks down under personal services. The increase is $185,684. This includes contractual and negotiated increases. All contracts are settled and there are no new positions. Under purchase of services, the increase is $41,585. Under the administrative, there's a $5,000 increase for software licenses. Under engineering, the increase is $15,000, again, software licenses. Under the building department, or the building portion of purchase of services, the increase, or the net increase is $21,585 under the electricity and natural gas line item. I do want to note that we did increase the Civic Center offset by $9,059. Under materials and supplies, there was an increase of $9,170 under fleet maintenance, which is an increase for motor fuel. The total operating budget for fiscal 24 is $6,970,569, with $6,871,999 coming from tax levy and $98,570 coming from available funds. The available funds are $43,094 from perpetual care, $1 from the park trust funds, and $55,475 from the sale of cemetery lots. The snow and ice budget, we're level funding at $850,000. The SOAR enterprise for fiscal 24 has increased $196,289 to $9,344,988. The major changes here under personal services, there was an increase of $57,067. Under purchase of services, there was a $44,029 increase. The two items under purchase of services that increased, electricity and natural gas increased $4,029. And there was a new line item for pump rehab for $40,000. And lastly, for SOAR, there was an increase in the intergovernmental line item of $25,818, which is the MWRA assessment. Under the SOAR, the water division, the water enterprise did increase $1,025,221 to $7,229,715. The two big changes here, the increase in personal services of $75,443, and the increase in the intergovernmental line item of $718,773, which is the MWRA assessment. With that, I'll turn it over to Joe for any other comments.
Thanks, Kevin. So, for anybody that may not know me, I'm Joe Conway, Public Works Director. Joining me is Ann Waite, our business manager. Kevin basically took most of what I've written down that I probably would have said anyway. I'll just highlight a couple of things. I'll start with tax and then work into the enterprises. Just on the tax side and personal services. So most of what you're seeing in there is collective bargaining and then contractual increases for our employees. There is a little bit of an adjustment in the highway division overtime line. That number was actually cut for COVID and is still below that threshold. Felt that we needed to increase that because a lot of the work that we have planned is going to be out on some of the main roads. So our police involvement and utilization of them is going to be higher. And then we don't have any more work as far as man hours planned, but our overtime balances obviously all change depending on how the collective bargaining moved as well. Purchasing services, like Kevin had mentioned, most of it in admin engineering is all related to software. So on the administrative side, we had an increase in some fleet software we use that lets us see right into our vehicles live time. So as soon as they throw an engine code, we're actually able to react to it immediately. That's something new that we've been doing to try to stop problems with the small and not let them grow. And then another big thing for us is as we slowly migrate into a more Esri-based, GIS-centric data storage and asset management, we're slowly building up the amount of licenses we need. So that covers that. In engineering, the big hit there is AutoCAD. Many of you in the room know, but for those who don't, AutoCAD is basically what every plan that goes out and gets drawn is done in. Without that, we wouldn't be fully designed and shovel ready to be as aggressive we are with some of the grants and different things we have going on. In buildings, just to touch on that, so buildings, anywhere we have anything related to building fuel, whether it's electricity or natural gas, we do not have any buildings, with the exception of the Ewell School, which is paid for by a tenant, that are heated by oil. Everything is natural gas and or electric. All of that is basically a multi-year average. So we use a 3-year consumption average. And then related to buildings, gas and electric, then we have a conversation with the light department. We ask them for what their forecast and what their rate is. And we simply apply our average tendency to where they see their rates per kilowatt hour and per gas thermite. Material supplies, we tried to keep this as bare bones as we could. I'm sure my supervisors weren't exactly thrilled with me when I kept asking them that, they're going to have to get creative and stretch their bucks, but they all took the challenge on. And with fleet and motor fuel, this is the same thing. So we basically take an average of what we're using for diesel and gasoline. With the exception in this one, we look to the federal government. They put out an energy outlook forecast, kind of where crude and different things are going to be, specifically gasoline and diesel prices. And we apply their forecasts to our average tendency and come up with a budget from there. Snow and ice. So I'm knocking on wood here. Every year I have a conversation with Steve and I say, maybe this is the year. And every year so far, it hasn't been. But I think one thing I explained to the town council that I don't know has ever been brought up here. The town administrator's request is what we're totally supportive of. What the director's request is basically a piece of transparency for the group. What that does is take a lot of assumptions. So we have about 3 decades worth of historical data. So the amount of times we get called out, the salt tonnage that we use during the year, the average, precipitation rates. We basically take a law of averages and kind of try to forecast what the average winter might be, should that hit. So that's what that 1.9 million represents. So far, this year, it looks like as long as they keep, the temperature heading up in the 10-day forecast, we look like we're going to have a very, very good return coming this year. So we're optimistic, and I'm not going to say anything more about that to jinx myself. So, Mr. Chairman, I could move on to the enterprise, or we could stop at tax if you'd like me to. It's your call.
Yeah, why don't we stop there and see if there are questions? So by a show of a hand, Dennis, thank you.
I think the only thing that should be pointed out that the department is fully uh, uh, employed, except for one person that he's still looking to fill. Unlike the last couple of years, he's been training, trying to get employees to fill these vacancies. So right now, he only has one, it may be filled by now, but he was anticipating, a full tier for the first time in a long while, which is good.
Very good. Did you say there is a collective bargaining still underway or going on, Joe?
Oh, none, they're all settled. So the only places that personal services changed was dictated by that. So everything is settled in this.
Don, did you have your hand up or?
You just asked my question.
Sorry. Okay. Anything else on the tax side? Anyone? And obviously the personnel salaries and so forth are on the other tabs. And the department salaries are down here as well. For the some of them being split. So that's all in the tabs. Any other questions? All right, Joe, enterprise.
Okay, so the next one I actually have in front of me is sewer. So much like tax, here, we tried to keep this as bare bones as we could this year. As Kevin had mentioned, there's a little bit of uptick in our preliminary assessment. I will say it's been my experience, at least since I'm working in the town hall, that when the MWRA gives us that assessment in February, it tends to be conservative. Those will generally go down in the sewer enterprise. But unfortunately, we won't get that probably till like the last week of June. But as at this point, budget year to budget year, we're up almost $26,000. Just a couple of other things just to touch upon in here. All the personal services lines stay the same. It's the same reasoning as I mentioned in tax. The admin expense increased a little bit. If you remember, I think I said it last year, this is something that gets transferred out to help with some of the expenses in the tax collector's office for doing all the billing that we do during the year. Things like group insurance is up 31,201. Materials and supplies in this are level funded, so those aren't moving at all here. One thing I did want to mention is purchase of services. So there's a small increase in utilities based on the same multi-year average that we put on the tax side. The increase of $40,000 for pump rehab is new. So what we had done outside of Farm Street, which is at the corner of Farm and Water Street, that's our biggest pumping station. Everything that goes down the drain goes to that building and then gets pushed towards Deer Island. Outside of that building, we have 18 sewer pumps randomly throughout town that lift low-lying areas and push, some of the sewer up to areas where gravity can take it. And what this item represents is taking 3 to 4 of those pumps a year, rebuilding them. We found that these things are something that run 24 hours a day. They never stop. And it's one of those things that we never want to break down, because when they do, the only other option is for the water to start surcharging back where it came from, and that never ends well. So what we did is we added this line item in so we could put these on a multi-year cycle to address all of these and make sure that we're not replacing pumps, we're tuning them up, we're cleaning them, we're making sure we're doing maintenance on them regularly, and we're avoiding larger capital expenses down the road. So that was the justification for that. And then the only other thing I wanted to touch on here is in maturing debt. There's an increase for 32,750. And what this is, we've talked about this for years and years and years. This is the inflow and infiltration program through the MWRA. Last year and probably the year before, I probably mentioned that Wakefield has taken advantage of every phase of that we could, up to phase 12. Each one of those phases was essentially 75% of the funding was a grant with a 25% payback over 10 years. After phase 12, there was a phase 13, which was a straight 10-year $1 million loan. and, there was always rumors that they were gonna start another phase 14 and reinstitute some of that grant payback. Well, fortunately for us, they did that. And then in doing that, they also allowed MWA communities to bypass the loan and take advantage of the grant payback. Or you have to exercise the complete loan. So we're gonna do that. We get $1,310,000. And the trade-off for that is a $32,750 payment, interest-free, back to the MWA for 10 years. So that's going to be a warrant article that I'll briefly touch on later too. But that is basically sewer.
Very good. You want to do water?
Okay, on the water side, so like it was mentioned before, the biggest increase in this one is the intergovernmental line of the MWA assessment. And why this is up, so it's two distinct reasons. The second reason with 3 parts. But generally, the MWA water assessment, there's an increase on their wholesale rate to us at 3.9%. So there's a financial component to this. The other component to our assessment being up is flow-based. So this year, warm year, dry year, consumption is up naturally anyway. We say it all the time, especially to the council when we get closer towards the end of the year, we start talking about potential rates. If it's warm and dry, we tend to see everybody's tendencies increase. If it's mild and wet, we see that go down. The other thing in this is we took a hard look at all of our accounts by meter size. And the bulk majority of Wakefield is what we would consider residential. So the meter in the dwelling is a 1-inch meter or below. That's about 7,000 accounts. Anything bigger than that, if you compare consumption by meter size across the board, is increasing. And in some cases, it's increasing quite substantially. So what that's telling us is that our baseline consumption for the year is actually growing. So as things like Foundry Street, 200 Corner Powit, things like that are coming online where they're now, multiple tens or even hundreds of units with multiple bedrooms, we're going to be using more water just as a baseline. We're using more water, but we're also billing for more water and things like that. But one of the things we're finding, and we'll probably see moving forward as a lot more of these things come online, is that our baseline, that used to be 23, 24, 25,000 people, whatever the census dictated, is actually going to now start to creep up. We're going to go through a little bit of an adjustment period there. And last, but certainly not least, as part of our regulatory testing this year, many of you have probably heard of PFAS. These are the forever chemicals that you're hearing about. You're hearing this conversation related to drinking water. You're also hearing it related to firefighting gear. It's some of the cancer-causing things that they see on that side. And on our side, it's some of the things that we're seeing in drinking water that are really bankrupting a lot of water producers across the country. Massachusetts has the strictest compliance threshold on that in the country. The feds will probably follow suit with that, but they haven't quite yet. To put that in perspective, so on a federal level, if you could imagine an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of sand, federally you have to be below 70 parts per trillion. So in that Olympic-sized swimming pool, you can only have 70 grains of sand that are over the compliance route. In Massachusetts, you have to be under 20 parts per trillion. So as part of our regular regulatory testing, we send out tests for PFAS every quarter. Come quarter 2, we had a result come back to us that we've never had happen before that was elevated. It's important just to note, at no time were we ever under a water emergency. We were never under anything that put us in violation with DEP. And we had no health concerns that we were aware of that needed to be communicated. But what we had was a test that surprised us and was well above our baseline average. So what we did was we immediately shut down in July, contacted the DEP, started working with them to try to identify, isolate, and fix, whatever might have caused this. Unfortunately, that process with them took over 6 months to complete. And I mentioned at the council meeting, so water production is a lot like medicine. When a physician or someone gives medicine, it's virtually impossible to take that back. So they need to know that they're absolutely right when they deliver that. And we kind of treat, the water that we produce the same way. So as soon as that's pumped out the door, we're never going to get it back. So we need to make sure that that is absolutely rock solid and exactly where it needs to be for the help of, the tens of thousands of people that are in town every day. So unfortunately with that, we had to shut down our plant. We weren't able to offset our assessment through a year that was dry. We were consuming a lot of water, and we could have offset through Broadway. We probably lost somewhere between 60 and 80 million gallons out of that. So our assessment would have went up anyway, I think, but we would have been able to cut that down a little bit. We got all the way to the end of the testing. We complied with everything. Our raw water, which exists in Crystal Lake, is fine. Our finished water is fine. And as we moved all the way through it, we didn't find one issue that pointed out that was an easy black and white correction. What does that tell us? Could it be a laboratory error? Could it be a missed test? We don't know. All we know is we got the number that we did, had to go through the process we had to go through to make sure everything was safe and squared away where it needed to be. So that's the story with that line. The rest of the water budget, so purchase of services and materials and supplies in here is level funded. The admin expense that I mentioned in sewer is up, identical to the other one. Health insurance is up a tad bit, more than a tad bit, I should say. It's about $45,000. And then if you look at the maturing debt line, we did a lot of talking about the Harts Hill water tank. And this was something that we really wanted to go out with a conventional bonds and, stretch the payment as long as we could so the impact into the enterprise was as low as it needed to be. It seemed like every day that passed, there was more uncertainty with what the Fed was going to be doing with raised rates, different things like that. We did have $2 million available to us from the MWRA interest-free. The only problem was the payback was at 10 years. So when we first struck out for this and interest rates were relatively low, we weren't going to exercise that option, but as the Fed started raising them, we took advantage of it and played the long game instead of the short game. So that put a little bit more into that line up front than we would have wanted, but the interest savings in itself would pay off in the long term. And that is the conclusion of water.
Good. Entertain questions then on the enterprise and or from the tax side. And Dan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So I'm looking at both, I'm gonna go back to sewer because that's when I first spotted it. I think my comments are the same with water. I noticed at the very top, if you want to get, oh, you're there. Okay. On personal services, through the end of December, we spent $209,000 on a $1 million budget.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Until then I looked at, the transfers and it says transfer from DPW, but isn't that really a transfer to sewer and transfer to water? And who's paying the $500,000 in water and sewer? Where's that transfer coming from? I think that's more important. We know it's going to the sewer and water, but where's it coming from?
So that, I'll speak to the timing of it first. Unfortunately, warrant 26 was printed before we did that. So generally, we've been waiting till we get 2 collection cycles in to make sure everything's going the way that we hope it does. And we're seeing cash flow come in and there's no anomalies. And then we'll start transferring that. That didn't happen when that was printed. That's why that number appears so low. And then it's for both enterprises. And then as far as the other piece you said, so this is an offset. So on the administrative side, there's a certain percentage of salaries and different things that are a combination of tax, water, and sewer funded. The same thing happens in engineering, fleet maintenance, because they're working on some of the vehicles there. And even our buildings division has a transfer for some of the work that they do on some of the water and sewer buildings.
So it's dominant. Other DPW staff is contributing to the $500,000, what you're telling me.
Yes, exactly. So like I'll use myself, for example. You know, I'm in charge, you know, of a tax enterprise, a water enterprise, and a sewer enterprise. So my salary is split into thirds. The town engineer is the same way. Some of his engineers split 50-50. And then there's a percentage based on the amount of time and the assets that we have for fleet and buildings that shift that over. I believe it's 20% and 18%. I don't have the spreadsheet to put in front of me, but that's exactly what it is. So, you know, people who show up in the tax levy side of the budget, but they're doing work on enterprise related things, that's the enterprise picking up that portion of their cost.
Okay, so is it just salary? Is there also benefits involved?
So it's just salary. I don't know. That might be a Kevin question. I don't know what Trish was in for benefits.
Yeah, the benefits are down further on that page under group insurance.
So nothing in retirement?
Retirement's there also.
Oh, okay. So then my next question has to do with the water and sewer division. You've got a reserve of some amount of money. How much do you have at the beginning of the fiscal year, and what do you expect at the end of the fiscal year for water and sewer in terms of reserves?
I don't have it right in front of me. I'll paraphrase. I believe in water, we were certified at 1.1 million. And sewer, we were between 700,000 and 800,000.
And the plan going forward, is this maintain that level or something higher, something lower?
So the plan has been to try to boost that a little bit, as well as ramp up a little bit of the deferred capital that we've had in the water side. Ideally, we want to get to about, reality, we want to try to get to about 15% of our operating budget, but we're comfortable if we can get into about 10.
Yeah, you're about 10 now.
Yeah, depending on the year. So this year, we're about 2% over the collection rate right now than we were last year, and we'll know this.
Yes, we are 2% over.
Yeah, so seeing how the rest of the year goes, unfortunately, we're kind of lagging behind a little bit. You know, but understanding, you know, any of that increasing or moving in a direction that creates a little bit more of a reserve is going to be related to rates. So we're trying to take small bites at that and work through without being too drastic and keeping the, you know, the rate-based part of it sustainable.
Yeah, is the 15% sort of like an industry standard for keeping a reserve?
Give or take. So depending on who you talk to, they might even recommend that being a little bit higher. The only thing for us, we just want to make sure, you know, if you have a bad day in one of these two areas, it gets expensive quick into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we want to make sure that, you know, we have enough at a bare minimum to at least be able to, you know, stop the damage and then, you know, make ourselves safe and then be able to have a conversation on how to address whatever's going on. But you know,
Right,
I'd say,
like another water main break on Greenwood.
yeah, exactly. That's part of that. That's part of that tank payment. So hopefully I don't have to ever experience that. But
Yeah.
So that's retained earnings or reserves. That's not anywhere on the spreadsheet, right, Ann or Joe?
that's not on this. No.
It's on like the financial statement or whatever.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm all set.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? Enterprise, DPW, tax-based, snow and ice.
Oh, that's next.
He hit the snow and ice, just the fact that we were doing the 850, but I will move on. What's next, Joe?
So that's all we have for budget related. We can get into warrant articles if you want. We have 3 of them to briefly go over. I've kind of already touched on the sewer one.
Nope.
So if we could go out of order, I'll probably ask Ann. She's got all the refuse stuff. She's gonna quickly go over that budget for the year.
So the refuge recycling and yard waste, pretty straightforward. It came in at $2,370,747. It's overall 3% increase over last year, mostly due to contractual obligations and CBA. There is an added line this year of $30,000 for equipment maintenance for the street sweeper and the new screener. Open 33 Saturdays, 19 Sundays, and a bonus Friday to the day after Thanksgiving. A highlight, I think, this year was we added a cardboard container at the pit. It was so successful that we purchased a larger container because we had to bring it to Peabody so often. So it doesn't make a great deal of money, but it probably offset about $1,000. I think most of it was really just a convenience that people loved. A lot of Amazon, a lot of boxes sitting around, so they drop them off on Wednesdays and Saturdays when the pit was open. So I think that was a excellent idea to do that.
Ed,
Yes, what's the trend on tonnage? Up, down, historically? Recycling efforts, making any effort here to reduce tonnage?
So on the refuse side of things, our baseline fluctuated somewhere between 7,200 and 7,400 since the town went to the automated collection and the blue toters. Previous to that, we were over 11, 12,000 tons for the year. We had a little bit of a spike in COVID. Nobody was working, everybody went home essentially, so all the trash came to the curb here. But that seems to be, basically leveled out. And, we're probably going to land somewhere around the 7,200 range, give or take. Maybe a kiss over that, maybe not, but within the budget that was set for the year.
Mhm.
Recycling, I don't know the number off the top of my head, and we're probably going to land around 2,200 tons, give or take.
Correct.
So the thing for us with recycling, we just pay a lump sum. So that $490,000 costs us whether we have, 1,000 tons or 5,000 tons. What we were able to avoid in our last contract is we're not paying a processing fee for that, which I know some of our peers around here having a little bit of heartache because they're paying upwards of 150 tons to do that.
For sure, absolutely, yeah. That's-
Yeah, so Ed, we're locked in until 2026, man.
Till the end of 2026.
Well, that's great, that's great.
So that will stay the same. At that point in time, we'll probably have to have a hard conversation, but for right now, we're gonna just enjoy that and let that stay as it is.
Thank you.
you all said it? Yep. Okay, Dan,
Yeah, great idea on the cardboard. And just this morning, I went down to my basement and saw a very large pile of styrofoam that we've managed to collect over 15 or 20 years. Is there any market, or is there any way of recycling styrofoam? Is that in the
So-
cards?
So styrofoam is one of those things that we won't, right now it can't be recycled. There's no market for it. There used to be a small market for it. People made frames out of it, but now there's just no market. No one even interested in picking it up.
Wow. So it's just gonna keep accumulating in my basement. Okay,
basically.
yeah.
I'll
Dan, you
piggyback-
got rid of the books, got rid of all the library books, Dan, come on.
Hey, that's a big start.
I'll piggyback on that though for a second, Dan. So what we did start doing, the cardboard thing really was a convenience feature. And it was really, when we were balancing out the do we weekly recycle, do we not weekly recycle, is the cost benefit there, to essentially double the budget and go weekly. We've also looked into a couple of other commodities, and I think we're pretty close to making it public on another offset that we're going to have, which we should be able to generate. Well, I know we'll be able to generate a little bit of revenue from, at least offset the cost of taking it and process it. So anything that we could divert and get it out of the waste stream and not pay $95 a ton, even if we're only getting 10% of that back, is definitely worth it to us. And if it's styrofoam, you'll be the first call they make. I promise.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, I see others have joined. Thank you for joining. If you just did or recently did and I didn't see you. You want to do articles, Joe? Would that be next?
Yeah, so the only other two articles that there are, so we'll present the refuse recycling yard waste budget. The other one is eminent domain for $1, everybody's favorite from town meeting. Essentially, for us, it's an insurance policy. It'll just allow us to take land conveyances and easements, should we need to. Really no frills there. And then the last one is the borrowing that I mentioned for inflow and infiltration. Again, 1.310 million. At 25% of that we'll pay back, which is 32,750 over 10 years. So that's it for the warrant articles there.
Great. Any questions on those? Pretty straightforward. All right, Ann, Joe, or Steve, anything else on DPW?
No, I think they do a great job. And one thing they didn't talk about on the cardboard recycling is Joe and Ann came to me and said, hey, after the holidays, why don't we put a bin in the town hall parking lot so people can get rid of their cardboard? And I think that thing got filled like in a day, right? And we had to, but it worked out really well. So they do a great job, and I know that the community appreciates it, and it's having that contract going out to 2026 was huge, and they really work it to make sure we don't have the problems with trash removal like some of our surrounding communities had, with no one showing up. And there's nothing worse than that, and they do a great job managing it. And I think it's really because of the relationship that Joe and Ann and the team has with our providers. So great job, guys.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And again, an overall budget 3.5 certainly feels sustainable, and appreciate the efforts from both of you. And thanks for taking the time to meet with the subcommittee. And I know I was on one of the several meetings. So thank you all. Anybody else then? DPW, last call. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Hey, guys.
All right. And we have, the next item is the school department overview. Doug Lyons is here, and there are several other members from the school committee on. And not, Christine is not on, I don't believe. So I will turn it over to Doug if you're starting.
Thank you very much, Jim. I know you discussed some of the items in our budget and at the end of your last meeting. This is an overview of the proposed budget that we made to school committee on this past Tuesday, 3/14. And so this is just a kind of a redacted version or a summarized version of the slide deck that was presented to them. We had talked about, the information that we're able to share, what are our budget priorities, explain why these are our priorities. One of the things that we're thinking a lot about is really trying to forecast out to FY 25 and 26, and also to leave time to answer any questions that the group might have. The priorities for FY 24, as students are returning back from COVID, we have just a really tremendous range of needs in our classrooms. Some students returned from modified schedules and from COVID, really just ready to get back at it, ready to participate in schooling. Their skills are sharp and they're ready to go. While other students have real gaps in their development, gaps in their learning, gaps in their social and emotional development. And so that's playing out differently at really every level. So if you think about, the amount of school that's missed by especially our younger students, if you were in kindergarten during COVID, when you're on a modified schedule or out of school for a couple of years, you're returning to school in grade 2 or grade 3, and you've had a tremendous kind of interruption. So with those kind of range of needs, it has really presented the need for us to create intervention services that support academics, social, emotional, and mental health, as well as kind of work outside of the classroom and counseling during the school day. And so, one of the things in reference to the students that are back and are really able to jump right in, we're really thinking about how to accelerate those students and think about points of acceleration. We're looking very closely at the emotional and behavioral health of students. One of the things that we're looking at is really trying to fund as many positions as possible through grant funding. So this year, we were able to add a 1.0 grant-funded adjustment counselor at the high school. This was a priority that was highlighted in the budget last year. This grant is a partnership grant that's facilitated by our local Board of Health. We're partnering with Stoneham and Melrose, and each district added an adjustment counselor, and we have funding for 3 years for that position. So we're really pleased to do that. This year, I'll say more about kind of our English language learners, which is our next priority. The number of students that are moving into the district and families that are moving into the district whose first language is not English has increased by about 20 families. And when students come into the school, we do a home language survey and a home language test. And from that test, we're able to assess their English proficiency, and they kind of rate that on a scale. And based on that scale, that correlates to the support that we need to provide for them in terms of English language learner support, which we now call EL support. Special education continues to be a real focal point for us. We're seeing some benefits in regard to the programming that we're building in district. But we will have students coming from the middle school to the high school that have language-based needs. And so because they have language-based needs and we don't have that program to go to the high school, the two positions that we need to get in this year's budget, if possible, are EL support and special education support. We run the risk, if we don't provide EL support, that's a mandated requirement that we need to provide students. And in terms of special education, we run the risk of students going out of district. And right now, our out of district numbers are down. And so we're very pleased about that. Additionally, you've heard this across the board, labor. Labor is you all watch your news channels. We are paying very close attention about how labor is in negotiations are going across the state. And how they're being led by the Mass Teachers Association. Our ability to kind of hire teachers and retain teachers has changed. It's very, very difficult to hire for a number of positions. And it's also an important piece for us is really thinking about settling the contract and kind of looking at what other communities have needed to do to settle their teacher contract. This year, we've just started negotiating with our teachers. We have 7 bargaining units in total. 6 of the 7 are settled. We settled those last spring. So that's where we're at. We also want to continue to kind of continue the preventative maintenance that we've started on our buildings so we don't slide back to where we were in the past. And we want to keep at the forefront here, the focus here, that this budget serves 600 employees in 7 bargaining units and close to 3,400 students at this point. And so we've talked about knowns and unknowns. So in terms of knowns, we budget for what is known. It's kind of the language that we use. I just want to make sure let me get back to the correct slide. So in terms of knowns and unknowns, we know this year labor is going to be, and in this kind of budget, labor, and for the next number of fiscal years, labor is going to be a cost for us and a big increase for us. And we're really thinking about how to make that work. We need to create schedules to increase opportunities to meet the needs of students in all the areas that I suggested earlier. And we need to prioritize time for professional development so teachers can develop the skills to meet the student needs as well. We're looking at technology. We brought on Power School this year, which is a new student management system. And we're looking to collaborate with the town to upgrade Munis. In terms of things that are unknown at this point, human resources. We don't know what the number is going to be for the contract to settle it. We can, a reasonable predictor is what other districts across the state are settling for. But, we need to work on that. We also need to pay very close attention to our out-of-district costs. Tuitions in those programs are slated to go up this year between 11 and 14%. Because our numbers are down, the overall cost center for that is also down. We're also looking at increases in goods and services and really trying to pay attention to that. We did have a cost savings with transportation this year. Transportation's going up, but we are locked in with a contract with NRT for 2 more years, for years 4 and 5. So we're in pretty good shape, and we will save money in those areas. If we're just looking ahead, challenges that we're thinking about, school safety and cyber safety. That's while students are in school and outside of school. We do need to address kind of gaps in achievement, as I've referenced earlier, in regard to the range of needs that students are demonstrating in classes. Human resources, labor, right? And so I can't say enough about that. And, we are building a new high school, which will address NEASC accreditation and ADA accessibility. We're also keenly aware that the town voted and supported a debt exclusion. So that is an override, and we're not looking to create a budget that is going to be unsustainable, so that in years to come, we're going to have to do an override, which may negatively impact the taxpayers as well. So we're paying close attention to that. And we need to continue to look at special education and our EL learners. So I mentioned the 2 positions that we're looking for in this budget. We've let our principals know, as they've presented their budgets and their need for more personnel. Everyone presented the need for more personnel across the board. We've said no to all positions that have been asked for, and the positions that are being provided are positions that we feel we need to provide to ultimately save money or require services that we're required to provide by law, and that is in special education and our English language learners. And so this is kind of a schematic or a quick infographic. You'll see here, this is a build where you'll see the blue box is the language-based programming that's expanding to the high school for this year in the 3rd column over. And then you'll see the green box. There are programs where students are rising, that if we don't have a program available to them, that like we needed to build at middle school, if the students are going to high school from those programs, they need to have a predictable program so that parents feel safe and secure to send their children to school there. And so that's where we're kind of at with that. The budget that we're proposed to school committee is $50,090,191 for an increase of 5.22% for FY23. And that's an increase over last year, which and that's what we're looking to create. And this is a breakdown in terms of what is personnel, what is contractual services, what is materials and supplies. So you'll see in contractual services and materials and supplies, we've tried to keep those numbers really as level as we could. And really we're looking at personnel being the big cost center for this budget as we move into 24, 25, and 26. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. And for those, I think everybody knows, but we try to get the schools to come in twice to give us the overview here after they met with the school board. And I don't know when the meeting was, but that happened to be in the newspaper tonight. And what we like to do for those that are new is have the school come in, give us an overview, give us a thought of where things are at. It has not been voted on yet. Doug, is that right? Or had it been voted?
That's correct. It won't be voted on until the 28th in the next meeting.
Anyway, just kind of covering an overview for anybody that isn't familiar with it.
Sure.
So the schools will be back at our next meeting, which is 3/27 right now. Is that still, or is that changing? But anyway.
So the budget's not going to be approved, Jim, until the 28th. So I think we're scheduled to come in April.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, I'm looking at the
Not a
prior
problem.
schedule. All right, questions, Ed?
To the superintendent, Doug, the 5.2% increase, I'm assuming that you built in a projected increase to settle these collective bargaining contracts. I won't ask you how much, but I assume that's been built in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was also going to ask you about I did go on the DESI website today. So this is a pretty healthy increase in chapter 78, 699,000.
Correct.
That's good news. And you noted 20 families with limited English speaking abilities and whatnot. I'm curious to know whether the Student Opportunity Act is playing into that chapter 70 increase. Is there any real impact of that for us, or how did we get to 699? Basically, that's far more than the $30 per pupil. I know that.
Yeah, the chapter 70 formula is it's really a tough formula for me to kind of get my head around. And the reason I say that, and maybe when Christine Bufagna comes back, she could talk more about this, Ed, but in terms of chapter 70, it's not linear, right? And we've asked legislators when they've been with us, when you look at our census and information that kind of drives those programs, why we wouldn't get as much as another town right beside us, right? And so we have some higher numbers in different areas. The answers are never really clear. And so, but the $800,000 or the $700,000 increase, the projected increase is positive for us. And so that's kind of what we're thinking as we move ahead.
I was also surprised on the DESI website. According to the DESI website, there's actually a reduction in enrollment of 45 students. I was surprised at that. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, student enrollment is down across the district, or excuse me, across the district, yes, but also across the state, Ed. So, if you look at Boston had 55,000 students pre-COVID. They're at about 49,000 right now. So enrollment is down across the board. The good news is, in our projections for next year, our elementary and especially our pre-K and K right now look to be really full, which is good. So we're seeing a projected increase across the board.
And I assume you're going to be doing some sort of enrollment study on the long term. I'm just noting all the development in the town, and probably new families moving in, and then pressures going down the line.
So part of the when people are going to the zoning board and looking for permits to build, one of the things that they have to account for is the increase in students. And so Steve could probably talk more about that, but we always try to partner and really look at enrollment. We've done an enrollment study. And we've shared that. We've also, we've needed to do an enrollment study, Ed, with MSBA to do the projections for the high school.
That's right. Of course.
So we've done it with NASDAQ, and we've done it with MSBA. So we've done it 2 times, which is a 10-year outlook.
Right. In the high school, you're looking at about 1,000 students for the high school?
About 1,000 is the projection for the construction.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Certainly. Thank you for your questions.
Good. Excuse me, Dan.
Okay, I guess I'm on. Thanks, Doug, for this. This is good information. I got a few questions on the revolving accounts and circuit breaker. So
Sure.
On the revolving accounts, I added up the total balance in those accounts at the beginning of the year is $3.9 million. And at the end of the budget estimate, it comes in at $4.6 million. And I don't understand why those balances are getting larger and larger. Why not use some of that money to offset these costs, or at least lower the cost for these revolving accounts? I mean, they have $4.6 million sitting around. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So can you help me out with the revolving accounts?
Sure. Those accounts go up and they go down, right? As we get into the end of the year, and as we, absorb special education costs from those accounts or prepaid tuitions for special education, those amounts will go down, Dan. In terms of the exact amounts, I don't have that with me this evening, but we can follow up and get that information for you.
Well, it's in your budget. It actually shows revolving accounts, beginning balance increases, decreases, and then ending balances. So
That's
I
on
mean,
the budget from the website?
yeah, if I could point, if I can find the right page, I think it's in the 20s.
Right, but this is just that, but this current budget, it should, some of the payoffs come out of that, Doug, correct?
Correct.
Well, I guess my problem is, why end up at the end of the year, end of fiscal year 24 with $4.6 million? I mean, to me, that seems like a waste of funds.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna end, my point, Dan, is I don't think we're gonna end up with that much money in those accounts.
If you're increasing by 700,000 each year, and that if I look at those if I look at those accounts from 4 or 5 years ago, they're probably like 2 million, 2.5 million.
Yeah.
It seems to me that they should not be increasing. I mean, at the end of the year, I would expect the revolving accounts to be near zero or a small balance. To have $4.6 million sitting around, just it doesn't make any sense. You know, to go up $700,000 in 1 year is what, about 15% increase in the balance from 1 year to the next. There's something wrong there. So I would look to lowering those fees, doing something to give the parents a break, because you shouldn't be carrying those kind of balances. That's crazy. It's like a slush fund. And then the other thing I want to talk a little bit about is on circuit breaker. So I'm going to pull Kevin in here for a second. Kevin, how much of the 21 and 22 year budgets on circuit breaker did the schools receive, and how much should they spend? What's the carryover?
Right now, we have balances in fiscal year 21, a little over 300,000. And fiscal 22, about 675,000.
All right, so let's call it $1 million. So in my world, when I was working for Coopers and Lybrand and PwC, you weren't able to carry over $1 million from 1 year to the next. So if you've got $1 million in circuit breaker money, why is the offset the 1.685 million? And I'm looking for those who want to follow along, page 54, and not $2.7 million as an offset. I mean, why are we carrying these big balances from 1 year to the next?
Yeah, it's my understanding with circuit breaker that money can be carried over, right? And we do it to make sure that we're able to fund special education services. And so that's what the money is allocated for. That's why it's there. And if you look at our connection to the regular budget, our costs in the regular budget for special education have actually decreased for our out-of-district programming. So,
Right.
So I hear you, but I'm not exactly sure where you're going with that. You don't like the way we're doing it? I hear that.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, if you got $1 million,
doing it.
right? So why not use the $1 million to increase the $1.7 million circuit breaker reimbursement to 2.7 million and reduce this budget by $1 million?
Because if we're looking at, if the majority of this budget is personnel, it's year over year costs, right? So anything in an account like a grant, right, is a one-time, right? So if we're looking at creating an offset like you're describing, so first of all, circuit breaker is not for it's not for kind of being put back into the regular budget. It's earmarked for special education, right? So that's kind of one of the biggest reasons, but I hear you.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of your reference to PwC, schools don't quite budget like a private business, right?
No,
So
of course not. I get that. But I also know that, for example, there's a city in Rhode Island, which I'm very familiar with, where the school department ran out of money in one fiscal year. And then, so they didn't pay any of their bills in that particular fiscal year until they got the new fiscal year, and then paid, the previous fiscal year's bills. This is the flip side of that, but it's not good accounting. I mean, if anything, if you're not going to spend the 300,000 or the $1 million in those 2 years, why not roll it back to, the general fund of the town? And then we could put it into, we created that sped reserve fund, right?
Yeah.
And Kevin, how much is in that account now? How many thousands do we have? Do you know?
The sped stabilization, little over 300, maybe 310,000 thereabouts.
Yeah. So I mean, some of that money could have, increased that up to, $500,000, which is where it started off quite a while ago. But my point is that you've got, between the revolving accounts and the sped money, you got $5.5 million sitting around. And you
I
could,
don't think anything's sitting around, and use the term slush fund a moment ago. I don't know if that's appropriate to an appropriate reference, but I hear you.
okay. And then my last point is the 5.22 million, or 5.22%, based on my projections, and I've had Steve take a look at my numbers, and I've had Kevin look at my numbers.
Yeah.
We are in a deficit position for fiscal year 24 by $3.2 million, based on Steve's estimate of local receipts. Based on my estimate of local receipts, we're in the hole by $2 million. And on my numbers, we will run out of money. Our free cash will be zero in fiscal year 26. And on Steve's numbers, our free cash will be zero at the end of fiscal year 25. So what you're presenting as a budget is not sustainable. We're going to run out of money, or we're going to have to cut capital to zero, OPEB to zero, and a bunch of other departments are going to have to get cut as well. We just don't have the money for a 5.22% increase for the schools. I mean, I'd love to give you the money. We don't have it. So, for the school committee and their finance subcommittee, please go back, sharpen your pencil, because we cannot have a 5.22 budget for schools, or this town will be out of money in a year or two. It's as simple as that.
So Dan, I spoke about labor a moment ago, correct?
Yeah.
You did hear my words about labor. So and as Ed pointed out, we've built something into the budget this year, right, to absorb some of those costs. So to decrease the budget, or to pass the cost of labor onto FY 25 and 26, okay, some towns are doing that, but they're negotiating a cliff, right? Because then what you're doing by passing off money to the next years is, towns can't afford it. So they need to either do an override, or they need to cut staff, right? And
that's where we are. That's where we are right now.
Well, we're not here right now, right? And so I hear you, but if we're not, so we have yet to settle our teacher contract, and we're also looking to kind of spend money to save money, right? So we can put kids out of district, and we're going to pay for this one way or another, right? And so I think the budget that we're presenting really is a responsible budget, and we think it's sustainable. So I hear you. But if I hearken back to November or October, when we were at the tri-board, we had talked about very positive new growth, correct? We had talked about the financial forecast for the town. We were in a pretty outstanding place. And
we were past
Okay.
tense.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So as far as the revolving accounts go, the budget Dan's looking at is on the school website. I'll get that out to everybody, or you can find it yourself on the school website, but I'll send it out tomorrow. But that's some of the info Dan's referring to. Appreciate it, Dan. Steve, were you a hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the Chapter 70 question that Ed brought up, and Doug alluded to as well. I was very happy with the 8% increase in Chapter 70, and as I say, I always say I'm very happy with it until I check some of the surrounding cities and towns, and I look at towns that I think are demographically similar, and I look at Melrose, Stoneham, Reading in particular. I don't really look at Linfield. I don't really look at Saugus. Ed, I'm not going to look at Somerville because you get way more per student than we do. And God bless you. But I will say that it is very frustrating to me, and I know it is to the superintendent, Dr. Lyons, as well, is that when you compare us, and I've shared this with FinCom over the years, with Melrose and Stoneham, Melrose and Reading in particular, they get vast amount more per student than we do, and I think that they're very similar demographic committees. It's very hard to figure out why that happens. I've been to a number of Chapter 70 all-day seminars, and just when I think I get it, there's something in the formula that doesn't quite make sense. So I hopefully I'll learn someday on that one. But I do think that to answer the question about the Student Opportunity Act, our state delegation will tell you that this increase for us was really part and parcel of a greater funding towards full funding in the Student Opportunity Act. And that even though that I think was brought up that we have 45 students less than last year, we still had that increase because of the SOA. So I am grateful for that, and that's why that happened in that case. And I just wanted to clarify that as much as I can on Chapter 70.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Dennis,
What I'm concerned with is your current physical budget. Where are we gonna stand with year end? What are your projections for carryovers? I would not like to see a lot of prepaid stuff for special ed enrollments out of district.
Yeah,
All this money sitting in accounts to be
Yeah.
able to do that. So I'm concerned how much is coming back to the town
yeah,
basically at the end of the year, instead of saying, oh, we're gonna impact these funds for next year, and all that would increase your 5.22 beyond. So very concerned with what's gonna be left on the table for us for next year. Can you bring us up to date on?
so your question is you're concerned, or your question is, well, how much are we predicting for end of year, Dennis?
Well, how much you're gonna have left? Because, I mean, it may give away some of your negotiations that you currently have, but as far as your fund, but roughly, on your accounts, where do you think you're gonna be on special ed return, personnel money? I can see you keeping that in the side, but
Yeah.
overall, is your budget return to the town in a round number without getting in Pacific? I don't want to see a small number like we got last year because of the prepaid
Yeah,
stuff. So especially with almost 4 million in other funds. So
yeah. Dennis, I don't have an amount right now. I'm not anticipating having funds left over at the end of the year. In terms of revolving accounts, that's a different question. And maybe when we come back, Dennis, I can give you more information on that.
okay, that's all I'm asking, to get the information, not we'll get back to you when it's too late. So I'm
Yeah.
asking the early stage, before you come back to us in a more refined moment, once you get your budget passed, to be able to say, hey, this is what we got left. Because I think Steve would be interested in it too, to know how much we're gonna get returned.
Got
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you for your question.
thanks, Dennis. Evan, your hand is up.
You're muted.
Where'd you go?
Thank you, Doug. I'm back to Dan's question about the circuit breaker balance. Do you have you're talking about, I understand you can only use the circuit breaker revolving fund to offset certain special education costs, right?
Correct.
Is there more opportunity to offset general fund operating budget sped funds, like sped costs from the circuit breaker? Like, is there additional, I mean, if Dan's looking at trend lines of balances in that revolving fund and seeing it go up,
Yeah.
Explore that, like, you can apply it to that, right? You can use it to offset special education funds that you've actually budgeted, right?
So we can use it for special education costs that include transportation, includes out-of-district placements. It's earmarked for special education. So, but in terms of earmarking, using it as like a grant, a one-time money to offset personnel or year-over-year costs or program costs, we've never done that.
No,
No.
I'm not asking you to deplete I'm not asking you to deplete it. Well, I mean, on some level maybe, but not to, like my question ultimately is if it's growing year over year, if it is, and I don't have those balances in front of me, but it sounds like Dan did a sort of a trend line analysis there. If it's growing, can we do a little more from that to offset your general funds special education operating costs? You know what I'm saying? I'm not asking you to deplete all your reserves. That's
Yeah.
bad news. That's the other scenario that Dan talked about in Rhode Island, and I've seen it in
Yeah.
Mass. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, the core of the question. How much have we exhausted our efforts to do that without putting yourselves in a bad financial position?
Right.
Like
Well,
you don't want to do it one
right.
time and not have anything left, going forward. I understand that risk too.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, Evan, is we talk about knowns and unknowns, right? So
Yep.
right now we have, I think I want to say we have a number of students. What we've done is we've done an analysis of the actual number of students that are placed out of district and those costs, right? And so what we've also done is kind of we've looked at what our potential out of districts look like, right? So we have kind of quite a large number of kids that could go out of district at this point, right? So it's one of the unknowns, right? So instead of saying what we could do or how we could earmark those money, we need to work through the spring to see if those students are going to be with us in the fall.
Yeah, I understand. It's very unpredictable, right? You never know. I mean, anybody could show up tomorrow, or 6 months from now, and no matter what happens, you got to pay for it. I get it.
It really is. It really is. And so, but we talk about the knowns and the unknowns, right? So we're working with two amounts, right? We're working at the actual out of districts that we have right now, and then we have kind of the potential, what that's going to look like. And circuit breaker is in place to kind of to dampen that spike, right? And
Yep.
so that's where we're at. And I don't have, we won't know until we work through the spring to know if those students might be going out of district. And so that's something that's very real, and that will affect circuit breaker, right? And
Yep.
so as we know more, we can kind of keep the group informed, right? And I think, this relates to Dennis's question, which is, what is it going to look like at the end of the year? And, we have to get to the end of the year to figure that out because there are a number of unknowns.
Okay.
If that's fair.
Yeah. I just like, to Dan's point, we ought to be, I mean, Dan's done a lot of actuarial work for a lot of municipalities in Massachusetts. It's like when he's sounding alarms, I get nervous, and I think we should do everything we can to exhaust, prudently, all efforts to offset any general fund, especially there's something to be, so yes, it's unpredictable in circuit breaker, right? But also there's something to be learned from trend lines. So Dan, Mr. Chairman, if I may direct a question to Mr. Sherman, but I'm just wondering how far back you went in your analysis of these revolving funds, and did you only look at the beginning of the year balance and the end of the year balance, or did you take snapshots month to month, or some other period? Because
no,
I'm just
yeah,
spend it.
right. No, I
Yeah.
just looked at this year, and I looked at it today, but it raised enough questions in my mind. I'm going to go back and look at previous years just to get a sense of where it's been going to. But the $700,000 increase just jumped out at me.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
I haven't looked backwards yet. I will, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, I think it's prudent, as Evan said, and as Dan has raised. I mean, looking at a 5.22 increase, if there's opportunity there, it should be fully explored and vetted for sure. Appreciate it. Doug Butler. Can't hear you.
Hey there, yeah, no. I got you. So I guess, Doug, one of the questions that I have sort of been following up on like this, and we can follow up on the revolving accounts. I guess aren't you using a bunch of grant money now? Like you'd said, you don't want to do a one-time grant to fund this, but aren't we using grant money for this new add to staff and whatnot? I mean, and then we do it on the other budgets all the time in terms of using grants to add to staff and then figuring out if we're keeping them long-term.
Yeah, and so in regard to the grants that I mentioned, Doug, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and also the grants that I think you had a grant on the first page of your budget sheet or early on in the budget sheet talking about the use, some 400,000 roughly grant that you're using to offset the cost of the new 1.5 people.
Yes, and so, so this, for the past few years, if you're talking about ARPA, is that what you're referring to, Doug?
No, I think isn't the special idea, what you're using for the idea, the Fed special idea entitlement. I don't know if that counts as ARPA or not. But
No,
you got 830,000. You got 961 to fund 830 in special ed salaries. And so the remaining
correct
125 will. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with is I'm trying to figure out like, where is Dan's 700 grand in additional sped money coming from? And maybe you can refresh me, Dan.
And so I think we're talking, we're
talking different lines. Am I speaking
I think we're talking about two different things. Dan's talking about revolving accounts and circuit breaker, two different things, right? And I think what you're referring to is ESSER, which, and in the budget, ESSER funds are under IDEA are funding paraeducators, right? And so that's the IDEA grant is a renewable year-over-year grant. It's like Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? These are entitlement grants that are federal grants that are federally funded based on our populations in town, right? And based on special populations. So those are revolving grants that are reissued year over year. And so, so the IDEA grant pays for the majority, almost all of our special education paraeducators, with the exception of our kindergarten paraeducators. So that is a number of positions. Did I answer your question or no?
No. You answered my question. And then just in terms of me thinking about this, and I guess, and maybe it's that I'm looking at all this stuff wrong. Yeah, I see the projected end of year balances to be roughly in the ballpark of 3 million or so.
Yeah.
But it seems largely it's functional in the pre-K Wakefield Academy.
Yeah.
And food services line. And food services has been a mess because isn't that, the not charging, or are we charging now? Like, I don't know. My kids don't seem to pay for anything. So
we are not charging at this point in time, and we have yet to hear if we're going to be charging next year. That's going to be another big challenge for us, right? Because if we go back to charging, I think that the cost that we would charge for food would be a challenge. But we're going to find out likely in July or August if the state is going to fund food service again, and we believe that they are going to, but we'll see.
Right. I mean, and the other thing that I noticed is there's not a huge change in these balances.
Yep.
From year to year.
Yep.
There's maybe something in the beginning, and then okay. So that's
yeah. So I also want to be clear at the end of last year, at the end of fiscal last year, and so in terms of monies that were moved into revolving accounts or monies that were moved into special education. So at the end of last year, we got money back from COVID-related grants that we participated in with the town to get reimbursed. So we got a chunk of money back for that. And Steve also provided some ARPA funds to support us as well. So in kind of the last week in the fiscal year, we got a pretty large sum of money, right? And what we did is we encumbered that money to kind of offset costs, right? And so we can talk more about that when we come back. Christine is with us to give a breakdown, and we could take a really close look at kind of our revolving accounts and our circuit breaker, which I think might help clarify where we are.
Right, and I think that that is the big question, is in terms of thinking about next year and maybe thinking about a way of trimming this, is thinking about a way in which maybe you take some money out of the revolving if possible. Especially on ones where it seems like it's, if you go back and looks like you have an excess supply at the beginning of your balance, and not, you know, using it to offset some of this increase now. To get you more in line, and to probably leave, you know, to take some money off the table as not so much as slush, but as money that's off the table for potential other usages.
Got it.
Dan. Muted.
Yeah, I got it. Well, the last thing I was gonna give you, Doug, is right now we're projecting a total revenue increase of 3.5% over 23. So I'll leave that as a beautiful target for you to meet.
There you go. That's the overall town budget increase, correct?
Yeah,
Town revenue increase.
correct.
Any other questions, comments? All right, great. I know there's a number of folks on from school committee. Appreciate you all being on and partaking. Doug, thank you for coming in as usual. So we'll, I'll send out the budget that's on their website, the school website that is, tomorrow. And you'll all be able to digest that. So again, appreciate the preview to all that came, and again, appreciate it. Thanks a lot. We'll see you in a few weeks or so, or a month. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good. All right, we have Dan, thank you for that information, and some of the stuff you were looking at while others were talking. The town council budget is back before us, correct, Steve?
Correct.
Right. I can
And Kevin,
share that. Share that if you like, and Kevin will start.
Steve, did you want to say anything before I start?
No, this is this budget, and I'll answer questions. This budget does reflect the vote of the town council. Kevin will go over the details. It does include the removal of the greeter positions at town hall. I feel that was I think they provided a good service, including a feeder system into some of those other department openings that came up due to retirements. Gave us a good chance to look at how people acted and how they worked in the system. And they also took over some duties for some of the union employees, doing spreadsheets, making, stuffing envelopes, things like that. But given the tightness of the year, we did view those as maybe a luxury that had needed to go away post-COVID. It does include a new position that the town council added, Director of Strategic Growth and Development, really to fill in some of the gaps that they felt were there in the planning process for the town with the new developments and the pursuant of grants and things like that. So I think Kevin will give you the overview and maybe skip the paragraph I just talked about and go on your.
I'll go down my list and turn it back to you, Steve.
Yep.
The town council budget for fiscal 24 is actually decreasing $15,272 over the current fiscal year. This decrease breaks down. There was a decrease of $20,032 in the tax levy and a $4,076 increase to the water sewer and insurance transfer line item. In personal services, there's a decrease in this portion of the budget of $22,132, but there are contractual and negotiated increases included. We removed the 2 greeter positions and added the new position, Director of Strategic Growth and Development. That position, we did offset using ARPA funds. If you see on page 5, right at the end, that we did use ARPA funds, $100,000. On the expense side of the budget, we did increase the Human Rights Commission line item, $2,000 based on prior and anticipated current year costs and future year costs. And we also increased sundry charges, $100, which is an increase to the MMA dues. Main expenses within this budget, we have advertising, $15,000, which is used to advertise town meeting warrants, Board of Selectmen, town council hearings. And under professional services, there's a $26,000 line item, which is used for the traffic engineer, VHB. The total budget request for fiscal '24 is $581,425, with $497,320 coming from the tax levy and $84,105 coming from a water, sewer, and insurance transfer.
All right, very good, Kevin. All right, and I will just open it up for questions, I think. Doug Butler had his hand up first.
All right, well, so 2 questions. One is, I had thought when we hired this economic development director that like doing grants for getting all this stuff was part of that gig. And we decided we didn't need a town planner, so we did this economic development director. And now what you just described sounds a lot like an economic development director. So I'm not sure that we're talking budget savings when we trade 2 part-time greeters for a new position that seems like it's already filled.
It's not already filled. It's a,
Well, no,
yeah.
that it seems like it may be, isn't that, don't we have someone who's?
we do have someone that's focusing on economic development. You know.
So
they're-
strategic growth and development, I mean, we're not Somerville, we don't have, you know,
We do have, I think there was a,
the assistant to the executive vice president's assistant.
Good analysis, bringing
Okay.
in Somerville, I have to say, geez.
the council felt there were some areas that we needed to work on, and particularly
Don't
bringing
be
a lot
blaming the
of-
council here, Steve.
I would think, I will say this, that we had a budget that Steve put before the council and then it was tabled. So this budget is back. I would go out on a limb and say it's a combination of mostly the town council and small, if any, from Steve, as he described earlier, but I'll defer to Steve.
Oh, okay, no, it's fine. I mean, it may very well, it is, you know, it doesn't surprise me. Actually, I would be surprised if it was Steve, because this is sort of, you know, I mean, this is crazy. By the way, how'd you save money here? You know, you got rid of 2 $19,000 employees.
It's saving.
Oh,
to the
you didn't save money, you ARPA'd it. Oh my God.
Yeah, catch up, would you?
Yeah.
So that I could tell you wasn't Steve. I don't think
Why don't we
that's
do a
Steve anyway.
safer grant for it too, as well?
I know you love, you pick on my grants, but you love the school departments, Doug.
No,
But
I care about the school department's ones, but like,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have line item stuff for the school department anyway, so it doesn't much
Right.
matter. For this, you know, I mean, and this is, I mean, and by the way, like, oh, so we're getting rid of the greeters because, like, you know, we're gonna start kowtowing to Sardella.
Has nothing to do with Sardella.
All right.
Ed,
My question is really on the same vein as Doug. I did after the capital projects meeting last, I did want to watch that town council meeting, and I was a little bit mystified because it sounds like the council wants to put every imaginable task onto this new position here. It didn't even sound to me like there was a consensus on what this position was going to do. But I don't know what your perspective is, Steve, but how is this position going to fit in, and how does it relate to this economic development coordinator position that was created? I was a little concerned when I heard the debate because there was some suggestion that the economic development coordinator wasn't really doing a lot of economic development, and
Well, I
is
think
this,
there was, yeah, I think there was a feeling, and do you mind getting off that page for a little bit? Thank you. Yeah. There was the feeling that the economic development position right now was spending a lot of time on the housing issue and planning type functions and not getting the bang for the buck out of the economic development time. There was a lot of the council was pointing out that many other communities have a lot more administrative staff, including in the planning department. Those that aren't Somerville might have 3 or 4 people in there, and felt that by working in some of the planning and in pulling some of the housing subdivisions particularly together, that there may be we may get more grant opportunities and have a better cohesive product. That was basically their feeling.
well, then I heard later in the meeting a lot of discussion about developing an affordable housing trust fund and whatnot. So,
Right.
that's a heavy lift, I will tell you administratively. Can tell you that right now. So I'm hoping that even if this new position is created, that where is the focal point? Because when I talk about Somerville, I mean, we just passed the debt exclusion in the town, so there's going to be a very, very heavy burden on the residential taxpayer going forward. And I think that if this economic development coordinator should be focusing her time on trying to attract new commercial development into the town, in the interest of trying to relieve, moving the needle over to the commercial as best we can, and helping out the residential taxpayer, so that kind of concerned me when I heard that discussion last night. But I also, I mean, this is $100,000, but who's paying for the benefits or the pension appropriation or OPEB? That is going to be on the general fund, I would take it. Although I think ARPA could pay for some of that. But, the reality is going to be is if ARPA begets a full-time position on the general fund, it sounds to me like they're talking a transition plan here down the line, but we will have to pick that up. But I didn't have a real clear sense of what this position was going to do, or whether there's, apparently there's no job description for it yet. It was just more of an in concept. But I think, if it were to be able to free up the economic development coordinator to do economic development stuff, then maybe it should be considered. But that'd be my concern, that we, there's certainly a lot of residential development in the town. Any growth is good growth, but commercial growth is going to be better and more cost effective for the town.
Thanks, Ed.
I will say that the person in the economic development position has been working very hard and has been pulled in a number of directions and has worked hard in the economic development area as well. We brought in a major company to Audubon Road with a TIF program. We pulled them, stole them from Marlboro, or it was between us and Marlboro. I think they were in Somerville and they'd left. No, they weren't in Somerville. They were in the seaport, actually.
I'm happy to send businesses to Wakefield at any time if we could. For sure.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Are you all set, Steve? Yeah.
I'm waiting for more questions.
Yep. Dan?
Yeah, I'm right there with Ed and Doug on this position, because it'll turn into a full-time position. I liken this as, it'd be nice to have, but from what my interaction with Erin, she seems a very bright person and hardworking and does a good job. And Steve, according to the item, and I always have to take that with a heavy grain of salt, you sort of argued against adding this position.
That would be accurate reporting.
That would be accurate? Okay.
That would be accurate, yeah.
All right. So, from my perspective, I think the finance committee can, bail you out here and say, recommend that this position not be filled, because on a long-term basis, we just don't have the money. As simple as that.
I'm not looking for a bailout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Right, and then we'll have to, we'll debate and vote all the budgets in the not too distant future, as you know, Dan, and we'll have to see where the rest of the body goes with it. But, I just quickly, I would say, I looked it over, I don't know, last night or this morning, and it is just discouraging to me to see a new position added and then, opera funds funding it completely for the first year. It's just, goes sort of against the general guidelines that I think the town / Steve and others have been trying to work with the opera funds. Don't fund something that's going to, be a recurring event. So unfortunate, just my observation. So, Dennis,
Oh, that was my thunder. I don't like the use of the opera
sorry.
for this line item. Especially it's the only place you see it really in this budget. And it's just because it got re-erected, to having this budget postponed, to put it in. I'm dead against using the opera fund for a new position. Thank you.
Doug Butler. Wait a minute, did you already talk?
No, I already asked one, so it's Evan and Bill. Before.
Oh, I was going to pull the moderator on you and not let you
Yeah,
speak.
yeah. 2 minutes.
Bill Beaudry, go ahead.
Steve, it just wasn't clear, obviously reading the item and, I echo the sentiments of others as a taxpayer, as much or more than a finance committee member, but was the vote unanimous by the town council?
It was, at the end of the day, it was unanimous because I think they all wanted to vote for the final budget. Didn't want it to be that it wasn't against, but I would suggest that, that the meeting is online. It's on the town website. You can take a look at it. It's near the end of the meeting. You could scroll ahead to it. It's probably 2 hours into the meeting when it starts.
Okay, thank you for that.
Evan.
I do agree with Dennis. I don't think it's a great idea to use those funds for recurring annual operating costs in a new position. The other thing, Dan, is I'll happily make the motion on our vote night to reduce this appropriation by the commensurate amount. So you don't have to worry about that. And Steve, just one more question. Why didn't you steal Amesbury's TIF program? That one was ours.
What?
So you said you took Marlboro's.
No. I took the people were either going to go to Marlboro or Wakefield, the business.
Oh, I thought you were saying you modeled
Stole the business.
I stole the business. No.
I thought you were saying you modeled the TIF program.
No. I didn't think they really had it all together over there. So.
Good for you. That's all.
Thank you. Doug, is your hand up again? I'm sorry. Did you clarify that?
Yeah. No, and it is a quick question in terms of this position, but also the ARPA funding. Can you use the ARPA money for the 2 greeters if you like having the greeters?
Yeah, we can use the town council can use the ARPA money for any legitimate government purpose because we received less than 10 million. So yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you. Doug, are you digesting that? All right.
No. I'm pleased with that. I could save us 60 grand right here. You get your greeters and maybe you could have the greeters do some economic development.
Yep. So, Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just take an opposite tack for a moment on that. So, I would see this position as sort of on a project basis, short-term project basis, someone coming in, helping us do a plan or identifying opportunities or something like that, funded with the ARPA funds for the year, doesn't impact the tax budget. But I agree that it should not be an additional permanent position moving forward. But even if we pull it out of the budget, basically what we do is we add another 100,000 to the 2.4 million or whatever is left that we have to spend before the clock runs out. So we have to figure out another way to spend it.
Right.
So does that make
You
sense?
get a greeter and you get a greeter and you get a greeter.
Right, and I completely understand what you said. Yes, Don. Are you good?
Yep, thanks.
So I will I don't know. With the opera fund, Steve has heard this from me before. I have a completely opposite position on that. I think it all ought to go back and it all ought to lower the current inflation rate. That's what I think. I've been pretty clear about that with Steve, and
You
it's
have been.
unfortunate that small towns like us. What was that?
I was just
Somebody
laughing because I've heard it before.
I just have to say it just so people sort of know where I stand on this kind of thing. But anyway, it's just a very macro position. The other question I was going to ask or mention is I'm going to look for the job descriptions. I was on the board a little while back when the economic development person was created. If I can't find the job descriptions, I may ask Steve. I'm just looking to re-educate myself a little bit.
I'll dig them out for you anyway, Jim.
And for those that aren't aware, so at some point we had a planner, the planner retired. We waited a year or two maybe before filling and filled it with an economic development position. Is that about correct, Steve?
I don't think we waited a year or two. I think we
You guys hear me or did I freeze?
maybe 6 months it ended up being.
Yeah.
We filled the economic development position in 2020. Not a great time, obviously, to be doing economic development in the beginning because of COVID, but yeah, that there was a strategic change. The current town council feels that there were some planning aspects that are not being handled, not for lack of trying, but for lack of bodies and bandwidth. So that's really the reason for the addition on their part.
I guess, is this to get you a number 2?
I don't necessarily view it that way,
Okay.
but I think that that's something that might be coming down the road at some point.
Jim, I just found the description back from 2020. I emailed that to you.
Great, appreciate that. Steve, my only other question is for this type of position, you have a lot of sharing going around in the municipalities. Is this something that's a shareable kind of thing?
I do struggle with that. We can share a lot of positions. I think that something like this, it's a possibility, but I think you want someone that's really going to focus on Wakefield. And it's not like an assessor. It's kind of, the same work everywhere. It's not like a health agent, the same work everywhere. Even a building inspector, the same work. But this one, we want part of it is, planning, part of it is steering people to Wakefield, not to Reading or not to Stoneham. It's a little bit harder one to share, in my opinion.
Yep. All right, any other final comments? Anyone? Okay, we made it. Thank you both, Steve, Kevin.
Thank you.
So, I will open it up for committee comments. I know Dan wants to show the forecast, but are there any other comments first prior to that?
One thing I do need to set up a meeting with the insurance subcommittee, Dawn. Health insurance looks better than I expected. Let's put it that way. So that's a good thing. So I'll be reaching out to you, maybe certainly want to meet maybe next week sometime with the committee.
Sure, that would be good.
Thank you.
Any other, Ed?
Yeah, I want to thank Dan for bringing up the issue of the revolving funds, school revolving funds in the circuit breaker. And I was, frankly troubled by learning of those balances in the revolving funds. And the concept of revolving funds is program fees to pay program expenses. It's not meant to be generating a profit or be held in reserve. So what's that suggesting to me, if they've been generating these balances, is that these program expenses are probably being charged on the general fund, the school general fund, and the revenues coming in, because that's not how these things are supposed to work. I was gonna ask Kevin if, is it possible, because I'd like to see some more detail on this. Is it possible to run a munis report of the school revolving funds? Can you do that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that, but, and we don't have the power to close them, unfortunately. I mean, I've tried to do that in other places, but that's a school committee to do that, but they can certainly be netting down some general fund expenses that are akin to those, the functions of those revolving funds, and they can do that now, which would generate free cash at the end of at June 30th. But I would like to see the balances. I think we should delve more into this for sure.
Great. No, I agree. Thank you. Bill?
Jim, I know you want to move on, but given
No,
that,
no.
I
I don't
appreciate.
have anywhere to go.
Okay, I appreciate what Dan brought up and what Ed brought up, and I can't say I, really fully understand it. I mean, I understand the concept of revolving fund, but why would they not want to do that? What's the incentive not to do it? Is, I hear, the knowns, the unknowns, I get.
No,
we hear that.
I mean, Dan, I think it's
What's the incentive not to use some of that money to reduce the, the budget?
Yeah, I think the implication, and I won't put words in Dan's mouth, but so you have line item autonomy where you can move money around within the budget. So I believe that's what the concern is. If there's money there that should be used elsewhere to reduce the 5.2, or to whatever they're doing with that money is the concern, that it's there and it's available and it's getting used or not used. To your point, it's a valid question on the why, I guess, or the incentive, or what,
I mean, what if it
why
grows
is it
to
there? I don't have the
6
answer. To that.
million, 10 million, 12 million? I mean, at what point does it become fiscally responsible to, not be, drawing down those funds? I don't understand it.
I hear you, but this year's growth, the year-over-year growth in this is pretty de minimis overall. The only one that has a sizable overage is Wakefield Academy. Had their balance go from 734 to 878. So that was the biggest increase in any of these revolvers. And a lot of them were up or down $2,000 or $3,000.
Doug, I disagree. I went through the math and I added up all looks like about 22 numbers. And the sum at the end of the year is 4,613,000.
You're
And the
looking at
sum,
page 21.
21 and 22, you got 2 pages. And then at the beginning of the year is 3.945 million. So the increase is $668,000.
Right, so Metco went up by a lot. No, I don't think, no. Page 22 is page 22 in the PDF, or page 22 on the page. No, page 22 is not, page 22 is district grants, current grants versus projections. That's not the revolving accounts. The revolving account summary is just on page 16 of the page number 21 in the PDF, but page 16 of that line item. It's only 10 things. It's not those other 6. Metco isn't.
It's still a big balance.
What, at the Metco grant balance, current grants versus projections?
Yeah.
No, because the grant, like, it looks to me like that's just expense. So it's the grant total. Like, those aren't.
Looking at that.
They're not really offset. I don't think your numbers for page 17 make any, like, adding page 17 has, I don't think, anything to do with this. This is just what they get in federal grants. It has nothing to do with, and it looks like they've offset those expenses.
Yeah, go to the next page. Go to the next page, Jim.
So
Yeah,
that says,
that's not a revolving account.
No, those are grants.
Those are
Those are
grants.
Yeah.
So if you scroll up, if you go just to that one, like, the only real major changes granted, okay, so pre-K, it looks like pre-K and Wakefield Academy are the things that went up by a lot. Now, granted, there's still ample amounts of room here. Like, I don't know why the Wakefield Academy needs 900 grand in cash, but they had receipts.
Yeah, that's about, yeah, so that's about $2 million.
Right, and then
No,
at
no, no,
the,
yeah, it's a little even more than 2 million, but it's still 2 million. And that's where we got to. That's where we were essentially last year. Remember, there's that talk of last year, we had that question around their revolving accounts. They had about a $2 million thing. They didn't add a ton to it this year. It's just stayed. They didn't eat it down. I think their premise was they thought there was a decent chance they'd eat it down. It
right,
doesn't.
and you see the line item revolving offset. So it was 847 and they upped it to 1083, an increase of 235 from the revolving money for this year's budget.
Right, and so the 235 and 150 of that is academy and 50 of it is pre-K. So they're not, I mean, this is still a public forum and you don't want to have like, well, I don't think anybody's really going to watch this, but yeah, you don't want to have the $2 million available to give to the union.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I think, the numbers, again, this is the sheet that Dan was looking at. I pulled off the website that I'll send to you out of convenience, but this is the book, right? So we don't get spreadsheets for the schools. This is the book we get. And we always want spreadsheets to do things with it, and they provide some, but not all. Anyway, this is the quote unquote book. So, Ed.
Yeah, but the whole point is they should be netting it down. It should be zero balance on June 30th.
Yeah, the extent.
Good point that Doug just
is,
made. Good point that Doug just made, because the more sophisticated unions are going to be looking at reserves in particular in their collective bargaining negotiations. So there's no good thing by keeping those type of balances out.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, like they can't have zero balances at the beginning of the year for food service because they.
No. Food service. Food service is a special type of revolving fund.
All of them should have a decent amount of revolving money. This question is 700,000 the right number for academy, or is 200,000 the right number?
Yeah, well, I think 700,000 is high. That's my opinion.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The Wakefield Academy took off, right? And they've
Right.
got a very active number of students, and they're getting the receipts of 1.5, and so that's netting.
They should have made more money. They're only getting the 10% margin there. They should be.
And it's not necessarily it's by design either. You've got Kevin on the town side managing all the accounts, but there's, he doesn't have control over this, and sometimes it's just not managed to any great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been brought up. They'll come back with an answer, and maybe they'll increase that offset at the end of the budget when we see them in 3 weeks. So, okay. I think. Good for now, folks, on that?
Yeah.
Great. Ed, you good? Right?
All set, thank you.
Any other committee comments?
To go to my forecast.
Yes. So just the only comment I was going to make. So Steve, on the 27th, we did have schools in the Voc. Are we just going to have the Voc on the 27th, or I know there was talk of the schools coming later, and I'm looking at the original schedule. So do you know, or you can get back to me?
Yes, let me just flip to that page.
Sorry, it's the 30th, not the 20th. I always read.
I think it's the
I always read the wrong side
vocational
of the ledger
school,
there.
group insurance, and capital.
Yes, Voc Group Health Insurance and Capital.
And that's the 30th, not the 27th.
That's the 30th for FinCom,
30.
27th for Town Council.
That's the 30th.
Yep. And then on the 13th is when
So
the
capital and, excuse me, Can you hear Steve? He cut out on
yeah.
me, or maybe I can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me now?
I can again, yeah.
Okay. On the 30th will be the vocational school, group health insurance, and capital planning. That's the plan. On the 13th will be Wakefield
Thank you.
Public Schools, Medicare, cable, and any other additional articles. And we could vote that night too.
Thank you.
I bet we don't.
Yeah, yeah, we'll sleep on that thought. Okay, no other committee comments, forecast, Dan?
Okay, let's see. Everybody see the spreadsheet? All right, everybody see the spreadsheet? I didn't
Yes.
hear anybody.
Yes,
Yes.
we can. Yes, I
Okay.
can. We can.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. Okay, so I added DPW and the articles. One of the things that Steve had talked about was making the stabilization fund 0 this year because the money is tight. So I changed that to a 0 for 24 to save us about 100 and I think I had 150, 125,000 in there. It's 150,000, something like that. So no money going into stabilization. Steve had a number of 7.2 million for local receipts. My number was like 8.4 million. But if I put it in the 7.2, which is, I think, what we have to submit to the DOR, because they're going to look at stuff that we actually know rather than what we think is going to happen.
That's correct.
And so when we do that, the other thing, I've only got, this is Steve's number again, the $600,000 additional for the power line. I know in the past we've had $1 million, but Steve is thinking it's going to be more like 1.7 million for new construction.
I'm
So-
hoping that's very low, but I'm being Chicken Little, maybe.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. So Chicken Little says that we have at the end of the year a deficit of $3.2 million in terms of what we're spending versus what we're receiving. As I said, my number is more like $2 million. And using Steve's numbers, when I look down here on free cash, if I get on there far enough, our free cash position at end of year of 24 will be at 1.4 million. And at the end of 25, we're in the hole $1.6 million. So that's using the 522 for the schools. It's leaving capital at, I think, I had 2.1 million. Yeah, I had capital at 2.163 million, just a little inflation on the 2.1 for this current year. Obviously, that's a spot that we may have to look at for making cuts. We're also I'm also looking at potential cuts here in our OPEB, where we put in 1.4 million in fiscal year 23, and I've got 1.4 million again in fiscal 24. So if we make those cuts, if we cut out OPEB, we cut out capital to 0, we can bridge the gap of $3.2 million that way. I am not in favor of that, but that is a way. So we neglect capital and we neglect OPEB, and we can balance the budget. So that's where we are today.
Can I just add one thing, Dan? That the one thing that the forecast doesn't account for, and I get that, is that it does not account for returns from departments for fiscal year 23, which will supplement free cash. And in your forecast, it doesn't, and it doesn't account for increase in receipts from what I'm holding on my, from my numbers.
Right, yeah, my number was 8.4 million, and if I put my number back in, whoops, not 84, I need another 0. More zeros, please.
Yes.
Yeah, so now I got a $2 million deficit based on my best guess. But again,
But-
in terms of DOR though, I don't think you can use 8.4.
No, I agree, but in terms of, yeah, because we need to show, we can't just show a big jump. We've been very conservative there. But if you go down to where the free cash is gonna go over the years.
How much was returned in fiscal year 22, Kevin or Steve?
I think it was $1 million.
1 million?
Yeah. No, and I think you have that, and I think you probably have that in when, free cash is certified at the end of
That's correct.
23, but for 20, but for the end of fiscal year 22. For the end of
Right,
fiscal year 23, we're definitely gonna exceed what we projected for receipts, right, Kevin? We probably already have.
Oh, I've
Yeah.
already got I got
definitely on
8.2
permits.
million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've
I
got
think we're gonna probably get more than you had, Dan, too. I'm hopeful.
You're gonna get more than 8.2?
I think it's possible. Kevin, I haven't seen excise tax yet. We'll run another
that-
report at the end of this quarter.
That's the only concern, Steve. I know motor vehicle excise was lagging a little bit. The last time I looked, it was about 50,000 behind where it was last year. But building permits were
way up. Yeah.
Way up.
Yeah.
So
And tell me about the new construction in the power line, Steve. What's your number?
Oh, I just
currently?
think that, well, I just think that we've been carrying this much bigger number. Hopeful, this much bigger number, for new growth, that new growth being, well over 2 million. And I just felt that and talking to Dan is that big number hasn't bumped in for us yet. So let's be a little bit conservative there.
But as far as the completion and the actual online. and it
Oh, well,
bumping in,
it's, they're supposed to be pulling all the cable and getting it online. I mean, it's built, it's just
I
the
haven't
cable.
seen anybody pulling cable. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no, they have been, because I've gotten the complaints.
Great.
But it seems to me that the best business to be in, if you don't want to pay taxes, is utilities, because they have
I'll
every.
leave those poor guys alone. They do
Oh,
so
come
much.
on. Yeah. So I think we ratcheted that down a little bit, but I think that,
Okay.
we will have returns. So I think that will add to our free cash at the end of the year, is what I'm saying. When we close the books, our free cash will be better. And maybe if some of those revolving funds you talked about, if they're not used to offset the budget, if circuit breaker's gone back, 2 or 3 years, I don't know how long you get to keep it without rolling it back to the general fund. But that's for you accountants to figure out.
All right, so instead of 3 point something, it might be closer to 2 or under on the free
Yeah,
cash. side.
but again, we're not gonna
Might
know
be.
until,
No.
we don't know until new
Understood.
construction comes in, the new growth.
Understood.
We don't know that for sure until August. I'll get with Victor and see where Victor thinks he is, if we can. But it's, as any assessors, I don't think like to give you their opinion until the money comes in, right?
Yeah.
Any other, go ahead,
Yeah,
Dan. Sorry.
I say, we just need to sharpen our pencils, is where I'm coming from.
Yep. And just, on the schools, it was, the subcommittee was clear with them that coming in over 5% was going to be a problem. And that was way higher than we were hoping for when we sat and talked with them. So they were not unaware of the overall concerns. So. But here we are. Stefan.
I know we're going to be voting on budgets in the next a month or so. Is there any way for us to have a good estimate as to how much each of the department's budget areas are going to be returning back to town at the end of the month? So we can take a look at both of those at the same time.
I think in some cases we can look at some trends in some of them. We can try to give you something, Stefan.
Okay, yeah, on that, last year, I think we had over 300,000 returned on healthcare. You should be able to put it together a number at this point, or pretty close to that on healthcare.
We
Yeah,
can, we,
I do have a number on healthcare. It's gonna be probably around 800,000, maybe a little bit more.
800?
Yep.
Wow.
That, a lot of factors, but we can talk about that when we do the health insurance budget.
Found money, thank you.
and I think one of the factors in that was, there's less retirees taking healthcare than there were in the beginning of the year, or there's a few that are off the rolls. You can figure out what that means.
Quite a few.
Quite a few.
Don,
Yeah, Dan, just a question on the tax levy. Are we building in the full 2.5%, or are we,
Yeah,
do we build in less than that?
no, 2.5.
2.5, okay.
all right, Dan, any other comments at this point? Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, Dan, no more comments from you. Appreciate the info. So I think I asked for it earlier, right? The spreadsheet from Kevin, you'll send that to us, Kevin, the budgets that have been approved to date through town council?
Yes.
All right, I'll get that out to the group, but that's usually with the info I send. Any other comments from folks here?
The only thing I might add is if anybody wants a copy of this forecasting spreadsheet, let me know.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. It's for Stefan. I want to know what the picture is behind you. I don't know what it is.
Oh,
The
that's
woman?
yeah, that's actually Amy Winehouse.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought it was Cindy Crawford, but fine.
The only thing I would add is I'm a big Bruins fan, but that's not why we added Ellie to the group. Just so you know, behind her. That is,
How many unions do we have left to negotiate, Steve?
On my side, I still have police and fire.
Okay.
so that's not baked into the estimates.
That
the
is, those are not baked in. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there goes your 800,000.
Well, yeah, maybe not. But they are, it's a difficult negotiating time. Let me put it that way.
Not
Can
gonna
you
argue that.
ARPA overtime?
Can ARPA anything we want? The town council can do anything they want with ARPA.
Don't keep saying that. It hurts.
I'm saying that's the rule.
Don't make us want to run.
Okay, some interesting dialogue, and as usual, the schools come and the board is, as Doug Lyons likes to say, consistent when they come before us. So appreciate the dialogue and input on that and everything else tonight. Anybody else? Final thoughts?
Consistent and more emboldened than ever in my years of being on the finance committee, I would add.
Very good.
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you all for joining. Appreciate your attendance. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you, guys. Have a nice night. Nice
Sorry, all
weekend.
those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Hi.
Take care. All right, folks. Thank you. Steve, take care. Good night. Kevin.
Thank you, Jim. Have a good day tomorrow, Jim.